Hi guys, how are you? I thought I'd make this special presentation on the war in Iran and the implication for markets. Just a small little presentation I put together that might, illuminate what's going on, and maybe what's going to happen in markets given the impending war between Iran, Israel, and the U.S. Okay. As usual, we start with the implication for markets because that's what we're here for. So, as you can tell, we have a picture of the S&P 500 here, the SPY, and look, there's absolutely zero. They don't care at all about war in Iran, okay? Because the market's at all-time highs, so there's absolutely zero war premium, if you will, or zero war cost implied in these markets, not just for the S&P 500, but if we look at the Israeli stock market, um, you can see it's the same story. In fact, the Israeli stock market here, uh, I guess this is the tech market, so it's at all-time highs. Um, the Israeli ETF would be this one, ISRA. Yep, all-time highs. So what's going on? Even in Israel, when they bombed the actual stock market in Tel Aviv, the market is still at highs. Okay, so there's obviously some kind of shenanigans going on. Money's being printed and being put into the Israeli stock market. But regardless, if you just look at the S&P 500, you can tell that nobody's worried about this war, which is very, very strange to me. Okay, there's an opportunity there. Okay, but let's go into the small presentation that I made. It's called War in Iran and What's Going to Happen to Markets. Okay, uh, slide number one. Okay, let's assume for a second that the invasion is a total success. Okay, so what are the implications if the U.S. goes in, beats Iran, destroys it, takes over, like they want to do with Ukraine, let's say, but takes over and the invasion is a total success. Okay, so you're going to have here total control of the Middle East. Okay, this is a once in 100-year opportunity for the U.S. Let's say. Okay, what I mean by that is, let's go and have a look in the Middle East. Okay, there's many maps we could take. I took this one. Okay, this here is Iran. Israel is over here. For those that don't know, um, and at this point, the U.S. and Israel have completely destroyed Iraq. Syria is in their hands. Turkey is their friend. Jordan and Egypt have been subjugated due to the Abraham Accords. They've been bought off, actually. So these, if you look at the U.S. Top U.S. foreign aid recipients, Israel is number one. Forget after Ukraine because there's a war in Ukraine. Israel is number one. Then you'll see like Egypt number two. Like Egypt and Jordan take a lot of the foreign aid due to the Abraham Accords, which means that they are out of the picture. Saudi Arabia is the U.S. friend. So all you have that is against Israel and the U.S. at this point is Iran, which is huge, and Yemen. Yemen is a very, very small, impoverished nation that is in constant war with Riyadh and Saudi Arabia, and they're like winning. Okay, like Saudi Arabia is one of the worst armies ever. But Iran, if they control Iran, look at this. They have the total Middle East under their control. That would be a new world order. Okay, this is a game changer. Okay, so that is a huge plus on starting a war. Whatever your whatever you presume to use as an excuse to start the war, it doesn't really matter. For them, they're going to say that Iran has the bomb, or they're going to get the bomb, or it's a very dangerous thing. It doesn't matter. The net result would be getting into the war, beating Iran would be like a jewel in the crown for the U.S. and the military-industrial complex, if you will. Controlling the Middle East because of this one guy holding them back. Okay, this is like Persian Gulf, total control of the Persian Gulf. Look, Iran controls it right now. They could just shut it off right now if they want to, which they're thinking of doing. But imagine controlling everything from the oil producing region, you have all of the water access back into the States. It's just too huge of an opportunity to pass up. So that's what happens if the invasion is a total success. Okay. Second, you would have Iran's nuclear ambition is dead. The only dominant nuclear power in this region would be Israel. Okay, that's the next one. And yes, Israel has a bomb. Don't let them fool you. Everybody knows they do. It's the world's worst kept secret. Okay, but not only that, but controlling the Middle East. I would say not just beating Iran, but controlling the total Middle East, because that's what beating Iran means. It keeps China and Russia in check, because China and Russia have been coming up in the world recently. Russia is stuck in a war right now, but they are the two main players in the BRICS currencies, in the BRICS currency, let's say, union, and they're trying to create an alternative to the US dollar. Okay, they're doing this through gold, but also they're trying to create another sphere of influence in the world besides the US. Okay, because everybody knows that the US is the big dog in the house, and China and Russia are smaller, but together they might be able to stand as a bulwark against American expansion. Okay, these are the positives. Okay, the negative is that there'll be trillions more added to U.S. dollar debt, and we're already at 100. The U.S. is at 130% of debt to GDP ratio, and that will just increase. So it makes us very vulnerable. Us, when I say us, I guess I'm talking about the U.S. It makes the U.S. very vulnerable to any future economic shock. Okay, so the success of the invasion might be good, but it will leave the U.S. in a worse fiscal position. However, the benefits politically and like geopolitically are huge. Okay, so what if the invasion is a total failure? Okay, now you have Iran is the last man standing of the 7 countries in 5 years plan. Okay, this stops Middle East expansion by Israel and the U.S. Now, what do I mean by 7 countries in 5 years? Well, if you look at Wesley Clark was a famous general, and after 9/11, he came up. He told the world that the U.S. has a plan to destroy 7 nations in 5 years. This was in 2003. Okay, and the 7 nations are these nations depicted in these maps with the explosions on them. You have Libya, which has been destroyed. Sudan, gone. Somalia, gone. Iraq, destroyed. Syria just recently fell. Lebanon, a constant battleground, gone. And the last one is Iran. Okay, so every one of these nations has fallen except Iran. So that is in the crosshairs of the military-industrial complex, if you will, or U.S. intelligence, whatever you want to say. So given that fact, it'll stop the 7 countries in 5 years plan of the U.S. Okay. The second thing, and this is the big one, is Iran will develop a nuke. Okay. Now they have no ambition to. I know everybody says Iran is going to have a nuke, and that's the precursor that we are using to rally the U.S. into going into war against Iran. But they don't. Okay, they don't have any ambition to. And if you don't believe me in that case, I suggest you go to Dave Smith is a comedian, libertarian, but the person that you should really listen to is Scott Horton. Okay, this is his X page. Okay, Scott Horton. He knows a lot about the Middle East. Okay, and in this interview here, you'll see, which I will play shortly. You will see how Scott Horton is this guy right here. You will see how he completely debunks the notion that Iran is going to have a nuclear weapon and it's going to be a threat to Israel. Okay, so I'm going to play it now. You can see it's going to be like 4 minutes long, but you can fast forward if you want. But I'm going to play this whole thing so that you guys fully understand how Iran is really no nuclear threat at the moment.
Do you trust the Iranian regime as far as he could throw them when it comes to potentially creating a bomb.
It doesn't come down
I
to
guess it'll take too long. Anyways, you guys could go and check it out. It's going to be under Dave Smith or Scott Horton, and you can see how he breaks down how Iran has no ambition to make a bomb. It's basically a bargaining chip to like lift sanctions. Okay. The next thing is that the next positive thing that will happen if the invasion is a total failure, positive, is for the BRICS nations will benefit a lot. And Iran will probably join them and become solidify ties with Russia and China. This will be a big blow to the U.S. and the U.S. Dollar reserve currency status. I mean, the U.S. dollar will always be the world reserve currency, not always, but will still remain the U.S. world currency. But they're going to have a big competitor if they lose this Middle East war. Okay. Now, another thing would be that could there be détente in the Middle East, like there was détente between the U.S. and the USSR in the Cold War? Like if Iran has nuclear weapons, even though they're not super sophisticated, and Israel has nuclear weapons, that will keep both countries in check from expanding. Okay, there will be no greater Israel project. There will be no greater Iranian project. It will maybe create some kind of peace in the Middle East through the bomb. Okay. But a negative would be that it will probably embolden other Muslim nations to attack Israel because Israel will seem to have been weakened by this war. So this is what I think is going to happen if the invasion is a total failure. Okay? So what are the implications for markets? S&P 500. I expect an initial drop in the beginning, but as you can see, S&P 500 here, the drop will not be that great. This is might be a, and what we're saying here, by the way, just to be clear, is that what are the implications for markets right now? Like if we go to war, if the U.S. goes to war, okay? I'm assuming the U.S. will go to war because that is my, that is my base case, okay? I think the U.S. will go to war with Iran. Okay? So what will happen if that happens? So the implications for markets for the S&P 500, we're going to go down, okay, but not that far down, okay, because as you can see here, even if the U.S. fails and the war is won by Iran, okay, the U.S. is still the world's strongest economy, okay, the U.S. will still create wealth, GDP will still grow, okay, it'll be better than Russia, China even, and of course the Middle East, anybody in the Middle East. So after that, after initial drop, it will get bought up, in my opinion. Okay, even if there's a loss, okay, because it doesn't really affect the U.S. that big. However, in the beginning, okay, there will be a drop in the beginning once the war starts. Okay, so after that, where there's a loss, it's a question mark. Okay, like. What happens if the U.S. loses? Okay, like markets might continue to drop. Okay, but I'm saying initially when the war starts, okay, the markets will drop, and then eventually, if they see that there's some kind of deal or whatever, it'll go back up. So for initially, market goes down. Okay, after that, uncertainty. We don't know. It's tough to say. The U.S. is still the strongest economy. It could be up, it could be down, it could be very, very tough to say, but initially there's going to be a drop. Okay, what happens to gold? Gold rallies on war. It's going to go through the roof. Not through the roof, but it's going to go up. Okay, if Iran loses, okay, what if the U.S. wins? Okay, the U.S. wins, then will gold go down? I think there'll still be a bid. Okay, because I still think central banks, if we're talking about here, if the Middle East is controlled by the U.S. now, I still think there's going to be a bid on gold. I still think the BRICS countries will double down on buying gold. So even though it might go down after a U.S. win, I think it's going to still maintain at relatively high levels. Okay, so in the start of the war, it goes up. Afterwards, it depends who wins. If Iran wins, then gold might stay high. I think gold is in a perfect storm here. I don't think it really drops going forward because geopolitical tensions, even if the U.S. wins in the Middle East, are still going to be elevated. Okay, so that's my picture. Just maybe not as high as during the war. Okay, so I think gold benefits tremendously of all the asset classes when the war starts with Iran. Okay, oil rallies hard. We know that. Will drop if the U.S. wins, and if Iran wins, it'll probably still stay high. That is my outlook for oil. Okay. What else? Commodities, big rally on the war escalation. They will drop somewhat after the war ends, especially with a U.S. victory. With an Iranian victory, they'll still drop too, but maybe not that much because we might be starting some kind of new Cold War type situation, maybe with the BRICS and the U.S. Okay, so I still think that commodities will do well in the next decade. Okay, 5 to 10 years. Okay, rates. Now this is the big one. This is how all of this ties to interest rates. Okay, I think rates will stay higher for longer. When the war, because you're gonna have oil up, we mentioned, and rates have to stay high, because with oil up means inflation is gonna stay up, and with inflation up, the Fed is not gonna lower rates. So rates are gonna stay higher for longer. Okay, and you know me, I think what will kill this market is rates, high rates for longer. Okay, not right away, but eventually, because high rates means that the economy is doing well and like you're trying to get rid of the inflation that's being pumped into it or created after the economy does well. But that's also what kills an economy, when the rates stay higher for longer and it starts to slow down. Okay, and that's when the economies get into recession. Okay, so this whole thing, gold up, oil up, keeps rates higher for longer, which keeps the Fed in the sidelines in terms of rate cuts, and that's what damages markets in the longer term. Okay. Another thing is like rates number two scenarios. What happens if the war is a protracted one? Okay, now this is like a situation where a long war is always bad for everyone. Okay, Fed may need to lower rates at that point. It can't keep them high, even with inflation, because everything is going to starting to collapse. So this is when they might have to institute yield curve control, YCC, to prevent an economic collapse. Okay, so this is like not a very likely scenario, and it's very dangerous because the U.S. debt to GDP is already very high. This isn't like it was in the 1980s when the U.S. debt to GDP was like at 30%. We're at 130% now. So this scenario, very unlikely one. But if it were to happen, a protracted war, that's when the Fed will have to lower rates. But I mean, at that point, the markets will have already been crashing. So given all that, my personal conclusion is that the U.S. will attack Iran. The positives are just too great. Despite massive unpopularity with a MAGA base and most U.S. citizens, Trump will do the bidding of the military-industrial complex. Because I just think that, having total control of the Middle East, okay, is just too big of an opportunity for the U.S. to pass up. To them, they think that we'll spend another $1 trillion on this war, but we'll control an entire region. Oil prices will be down forever. Okay, will be low forever. We'll control this region. So I just think, like, given the massive positives and how, Trump is controlled by certain forces that will, he can't pass up the people that control the military-industrial complex are the people that put him in power. Even though his MAGA base will hate it, the people that put the money down and control politicians, there's going to be a war. This is like my absolute. I'm like 90% plus sure, and I usually make trades when I'm 60. I'm usually 60%. If you're 60% correct, you're going to make money. But when you're 90% plus, you're probably going to make way more money. So to me, the implication for markets is that we will get into a war. U.S. will back Israel, start using just aircraft, and the very, very tricky thing is to see a way for the U.S. and Trump to get boots on the ground in Iran. That will be very tricky to pull off, but if he can do it, he will, because the implication of toppling Iran is just too great of a temptation, in my view. Okay, so in my view, I think that's what happens, and all of these things that were mentioned before, the market implications for SPY, for gold, for oil, for commodities, and for rates in general, I think that's what it will come to fruition, because I think the U.S. enters this war on the side of Israel. All right, that's my 2 cents, guys. Talk to you later.